One of history's great mysteries is, who were the first inhabitants of the Americas? When did they arrive? How did they travel here? What evidence did they leave behind? While searching for a suspected Paleo-Indian site, which could be 13,500 years old, an archaeological team decided to dig just a little deeper than they had before. What they found has changed the course of American archaeology. This is Cactus Hill, located in south-central Virginia, alongside the Nottoway River. It's one of the oldest and most widely accepted confirmed sites for human activity in North America.
Cactus Hill is remarkably important because what archaeologists have found here is literally rewriting the history of not merely Virginia, but of the entire Western Hemisphere.
It was here, more than 18,000 years ago, that Ice Age hunters left evidence of their presence. Are these the ancient ones? Our earliest ancestors, the real discoverers of America? What can we learn about this prehistoric time?
In understanding time, then we can understand how humans adapted to different conditions over time. And so we're trying to create a broad picture of how humans changed through time, culture change. And you can put that into the broader perspective of history.
If you don't pay any attention to the past, you don't have one. If you don't have a past, you don't have a present. And if you don't have a present, you don't have a future.
The questions of how, when, and why human beings entered the Americas are of serious interest to anthropologists and archaeologists and have been the subject of heated debate for many years. There are various theories as to how human populations spread. Probably the most widely accepted theory of how ancient people came to the Americas is the Beringia theory. Today, the Bering Strait is a body of water that separates the Siberian and Alaskan peninsulas. However, about 110,000 years ago, there was a land bridge created by lowered ocean water levels that connected these two land masses.
Anytime you tie up a lot of the world's water in ice, what's going to happen is dramatic drop in sea level. What's going to happen in areas like Beringia, that area is going to get much, much larger and more accessible, easier to cross during times that glaciers are covering a lot of the continents.
Imagine a world where the vast grassland stretches unbroken as far as the eye can see. A land where the animals and plants struggle to survive in the cold, dry, nearly treeless expanse. That was Beringia, a 1,000-mile-wide land bridge, arid, cold, with scattered swamps, forests, and shallow lakes. When much of the northern hemisphere was covered in massive sheets of ice, Beringia remained untouched by glaciers. For thousands of years, animals moved back and forth across this bridge, followed by hunters.
There is not one uniform population coming to the New World, but rather a series of pulses, different technologies, different emphases, different adaptational patterns, some of which might have included the occasional taking of big game animals. Most of it is broad-spectrum foraging.
Once across the land bridge, there are two prevailing views of further southern migration. One is that as the glacial ice packs that covered the continent shifted, paths were formed that animals and humans followed deeper into the Americas. The second view is that people followed the ice-free Pacific coastline by boat, possibly as far as modern-day Chile.
The climate in Beringia and along the coast in Alaska, we're finding out now, based on new evidence, that a lot of that was ice-free. And so people and animals could have migrated right along that coastal area as well.
Yet another theory proposes that these early hunters migrated across the Atlantic Ocean by boat, following the pack ice. This Atlantic route is known as the Solutreans hypothesis, which traces the origins of a unique tool-making style to the Solutreans culture of Ice Age Western Europe. Just how far early humans traveled and how they got to the Americas is still fiercely debated. However, through sites like Cactus Hill, archaeologists know of their existence in Virginia. Who were the first people in Virginia, these ancient ones? Where do we begin to understand a time so distant from our own? We go back to the ice. In approximately 4.6 billion years of Earth history, there have been 4 major episodes of glaciation, what we call ice ages. Our current ice age is said to have started about 2.6 million years ago.
The Wisconsinin is an old name that was used for the last glaciation that we had, starting 120,000 years ago or so, and basically ending about 10,000 radiocarbon years ago.
The ice was down to New York. New York City was under, almost a mile of ice, as was Boston and Chicago.
And this glacier would have cooled down climates quite a bit in more northern areas. When it ended, we had dramatic climate change and warming.
During this time, the ice sheets advanced and retreated. It is during the most recent retreat, the onset of the current interglacial, that the climate warmed and the forests reclaimed grassland and tundra. As the great ice sheets retreated at the end of the Great Long Winter, a more favorable climate allowed vegetation to spread across the newly exposed land. This led to the further migration and exploration by ancient people.
What we think, particularly in the late Ice Age, we had a more equable climate. Therefore, by equable, what I mean is the seasonal extremes weren't really there. The winters would have been relatively warmer, and the summers were relatively cooler, and therefore it was more of a mild year-round climate.
There is no modern environment that we can compare to the Ice Age and the vegetation at that time. This new, milder climate south of the glacier mass would have provided an inviting hunting grounds for the ancient ones in Virginia.
This is the kind of locality that would draw people in. You have a lot of animals coming in, not only for the water, all the vegetation that's here, this lush vegetation that would have been in this valley.
Due to the lush grasslands, animals were large and plentiful. Hunters followed the large game animals through the ice into the unknown. Perhaps the most impressive of the Ice Age mammals were the giant mastodons and mammoths. Both of these ancient creatures are related to the modern elephant. Mastodons were most common in the Ice Age spruce forests of the eastern United States.
Folks will often say, I had no idea that there were mastodons here. And regardless of where they're from, in Virginia and Eastern America, I say, well, you had mastodons in your backyard as well.
But perhaps the animals that most influenced the lives of the ancient ones would have been the giant carnivores. Ancient American Indian stories refer to fantastically large, fearsome creatures that sometimes threatened human beings. Evidence of such creatures has been found. The saber-toothed tiger is most famous for its long canine teeth that averaged a staggering 7 inches. These Ice Age killers could reach a size of well over 600 pounds of teeth, claws, and muscle. The dire wolf was sometimes 5 feet long and could weigh as much as 175 pounds. But the largest carnivore of the time was the giant short-faced bear, which could rear back on its hind legs to stand at an overwhelming 11 feet. Its name comes from its short, broad muzzle, which would have been ideal for crushing bones. These were just some of the mammals that the first people would have had to coexist with when they reached Virginia. New clues to when these first people arrived are being uncovered by archaeologists. but what they are discovering is challenging long-held scientific beliefs. The mystery of who the ancient ones were and when they came to Virginia is only now beginning to become clearer. For decades, the benchmark artifacts of the earliest human existence in North America were from an era called the Clovis period. This Clovis technology is estimated to be 13,000 years old. These artifacts were first found in 1933 near Clovis, New Mexico, where they got their name. Since then, thousands of these artifacts have been found throughout the United States, including South Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Virginia.
Artifacts from Clovis period have been found in every county in Virginia. The diagnostic artifact left by the Clovis people would be the Clovis spear point.
These points were made by striking a core stone to flake off a smaller piece called a preform. The edges of these were then chipped or knapped to fashion the actual usable point. Making these spear points required specialized skill and specific tools.
The toolkit that they used to make stone tools would involve bone and antler and hammerstone and leather to protect oneself from the sharp flakes that are coming off. The types of tools that you might find on a site would range anywhere from the points through hide scrapers, specialized hide scrapers called end scrapers, side scrapers, which would be more for shaving bark and things off the sides of round objects. There are flake tools, such as things that you would use to cut with, flake knives.
This is razor sharp. It's absolutely razor sharp. You can shave hair. Yeah. You can shave hair with it.
Clovis points are recognized for their fluted base. A fluted base has flaked channels forming a groove or depression on either side of its base. This allows the base of the spear blade to slip into a slit in the wood. The edges of the base were ground smooth to ensure that the binding holding the spear point would not be severed.
By the time you get to Clovis, you're not reaching the first people, you're reaching the level of visibility. There's now enough people on the landscape that you can see them. And so the Clovis points, representing not a culture, if you will, a technological horizon that spread among pre-existing groups, is that benchmark of visibility.
They had a preference for a very nice stone. They would use quartz crystal, very fine flints or cherts.
Situated near the banks of the Savannah River in South Carolina is a well-known prehistoric site that has been worked by archaeologists for a number of years. This site is called Topper. It is particularly noteworthy for its artifacts, the evidence of Paleo-Indians that lived here.
And of course the reason why everybody came here was to obtain chert. Chert is an impure form of flint, and that formed the basis of their stone tools such as blades and scrapers and knives and so forth. So with this common denominator of a chert quarry, it's been a magnet that has drawn people to the Topper site for thousands of years, perhaps more years than any of us had been prepared to believe until recently.
Were these Clovis people the ancient ones, the first Americans? For many years this was believed to be so, but now that belief is changing.
The predominant view in the field now is toward a much earlier human presence than Clovis. That Clovis model began to gestate, if you will, in the mid-1930s, and the makers of those signature projectile points were thought to have been descendants of the very first small band of folk who crossed the Bering Straits no more than 12,000 radiocarbon years ago. And the Clovis model was taught as gospel, certainly while I was going to school, and up until relatively recently.
The Clovis first model would start to change with a dramatic discovery in a quiet corner of Sussex County, Virginia. A local farmer familiar with Indian artifacts found what he believed to be a Clovis spear point. He showed it to archaeologists. The result? a search by two independent archaeological teams at a site called Cactus Hill. The first team was led by Joe and Lynn McAvoy, and the second by Mike Johnson.
The steps involved with Cactus Hill included actually phases over several years, starting in 1993, when we went in and spent 18 straight days, both crews, working on the site, 10 hours a day without break. And we were going for the Clovis component because we didn't know there was anything else there.
And then the discovery. A discovery that would change American archaeology.
McAvoy was working in Area B, and we were working in Area A. We hit our Clovis level and stopped. Well, he lives down there. He lives not too far away from the site, so he kept working there for a while because he had it. And he went down below there, that level, where he had the Clovis floor. That's when he got the pre-Clovis date and some blades.
Indisputable human-made artifacts, 5,000 years older than anything found before. This model would become known as pre-Clovis.
We decided to go back to Area A because we had stopped too soon. We'd stopped 2 inches under Clovis. And so we took it down deeper in 1996. We got a preform for a Clovis point with a big flute in level 9 and 10. And then in level 14, we're using 2-inch levels, so it's, what is that, like 8 inches, 9 inches below. We got this whole string of artifacts with 2 sterile levels above it. And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4 blades, 2 pieces of a point that fit together. These probably have not moved in more than 13,500 years.
These artifacts would make Cactus Hill a significant archaeological location by providing evidence of a pre-Clovis culture.
One of the things that's important if you're dealing with a site of this potential significance is that you've got good context or good integrity in the site. And that involves having sealed levels, essentially, levels that you can recognize as not having been disturbed. And in this site, we have quite a bit of that. For example, the first pre-Clovis date, the Clovis came beneath a Palmer or early Archaic level. Then you have the Clovis level, and then you have the pre-Clovis level in sequence, separated by areas that don't have stuff.
What has been done at Cactus Hill is like opening a very, very small window in a dark room. The total number of pre-Clovis artifacts will not fill a 1-gallon plastic bag. However, something can be learned from the artifacts that we do have. We have patterned artifacts, we have points, we have cores, we have blades, and we have tools. These tools are all consistent with a high-quality stone tool technology. What this means is that these people were very sophisticated hunter-gatherers. The points indicate they were hunters. The cores and blades and other tools seem to indicate that they had a relatively diversified existence. These conclusions, based on this new evidence, remain controversial.
Cactus Hill has indisputable artifacts. Some of even the opponents have said, opponents to Clovis first, have stated that one thing they can't argue with at Cactus Hill, that the pre-Clovis artifacts look like what they should look like if they were pre-Clovis.
There are significant variations between the Clovis and pre-Clovis spear points. The Clovis were shaped differently, with a fluted and ground base. The pre-Clovis were thinner and had no fluting. This shows the change in technology over approximately a 5,000-year period. With this change in technology comes a change in thinking.
Right now is a remarkably exciting time to be an archaeologist. One thing I found over the years is that once you think you understand something, a number of other questions arise, and that's exactly what you see occurring here at Cactus Hill and related sites. We thought we had a very good understanding of Paleo-Indians and the Clovis period. Based on work here at Cactus Hill and other sites, we're finding that Clovis was not the beginning, but that others preceded them.
Many American Indian peoples believe their ancestors have always been here. What does the new evidence at Cactus Hill tell us?
We now realize that people were living in Virginia well over 15,000 years ago, and we did not have that understanding before work began here at Cactus Hill and related sites such as Meadowcroft and Topper.
Cactus Hill was not the first site to find pre-Clovis artifacts, but now has the oldest undisputed evidence of human habitation in the Americas. It is believed that the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania is where the first pre-Clovis artifacts were discovered.
The discoveries at places like this and other sites indicates that the picture of the peopling of the New World is infinitely more complicated than we ever thought it was back in the early 1960s, or for that matter, the 50s, 40s, or 30s.
Cactus Hill is important because it follows on the heels of the excavations at Meadowcroft. Meadowcroft was a unique experience in Pennsylvania where pre-Clovis artifacts were found for probably the first time, at least identified for the first time stratigraphically. And what all the archaeologists in North America said at that point in time is, we need some redundancy. We need some other sites that mirror this distribution of artifacts. And lo and behold, not immediately, but later, Cactus Hill shows up, and we start to see that redundancy.
Why are the discoveries at these sites important? What do they tell us about our early ancestors? Does this give us more insight as to when they first arrived?
In archaeology, for about 70 years, the prevailing theory was that Clovis was first, that humans got here 13,000 years ago, and there were a couple of sites out there, Meadowcroft and Monteverdi, namely, that were challenging that but never really accepted in the archaeological community. So a site like Cactus Hill coming along when it did helped to break down as it would be called, a paradigm.
It takes time for a majority of archaeologists to break a paradigm, to accept a new way of thinking. But at Cactus Hill, the scientific methodology used has brought most of them together in agreement that this site predates any Clovis models.
For the last 20 years, we said, we know how this works, we know what's going on. And then suddenly, we're all wrong. And so we need to rethink. So I think this new debate is healthy for the profession, and it's really exciting to be involved in it.
Basically, discoveries like this underscore the frailty of pre-existing notions and concepts, and it's taken far longer than I would have ever imagined for that old model to erode, far longer.
Our whole vision and horizon about when humans got over into this hemisphere is rapidly changing. And it just seems like every year or two another site is found that's perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 years older than Clovis. There are some sites, such as Topper, that look to be even much older, perhaps. A lot of different investigators are involved. It's from the East Coast to the West Coast, it's in South America, and it's beginning to look like something that the whole profession could be pursuing, rather than just one or two people who claim they've seen something.
Archaeologists follow what they call lines of evidence. Lines of evidence are scientific techniques to date a site. The more lines of evidence used, the harder it is to dispute the conclusions. Some common reliable lines of evidence are stratigraphy, which is the study of layers of the earth and the ages of the layers. OSL, or optical stimulated luminescence, determines how long ago minerals like grains of sand were last exposed to sunlight, and radiocarbon dating can determine the age of substances that are rich in carbon, like plants.
Cactus Hill is extremely important to the study of ancient Americans for several reasons. One, it has stratigraphy. It has Clovis at a known horizon that dates to the Clovis period. And then it has a series of artifacts which are unquestionably humanly made below that level, also with associated OSL and radiocarbon dates. The dating of it, and I think it's around 17,000 or 18,000 years ago, would have put it substantially before Clovis. And also the fact that the artifacts bear some resemblance to Clovis, are not Clovis artifacts, is intriguing, because it's not difficult to see Cactus Hill as some very remote ancestor, perhaps, of the Clovis culture.
One of the things in the strength in Cactus Hill was that there were 2 archaeology teams working on the site, and that the lines of evidence from Cactus Hill all pointed to the same thing, and those included stratigraphy, the tool type changes, and all the other things, and dating that would go into validating a site like Cactus Hill. So it encouraged other archaeologists to dig deeper, and now, of course, there's a proliferation of sites that are now candidates for pre-Clovis.
The day is changing quickly, with only one or two sites that people wondered if they really were sites or not because they were so few. Other investigators are now finding them.
Cactus Hill is no longer an active archaeological site. It's been filled in, and Mike Johnson has moved on in search of more pre-Clovis sites in Virginia.
One of the things that we've been doing since the close of Cactus Hill has been looking for another site like this. And we've been trying to predict it using the model that we developed from Cactus Hill. We've been successful in finding 2 Clovis sites, and that's sort of the beginning. You really have to find the Clovis site, I think, first, because they're going to be on the type of landform that these people were living on during pre-Clovis time.
As the face of our history changes, these modern-day Ice Age investigators continue their quest to learn about our earliest ancestors, the ancient ones.
I think one of the keys to understanding Cactus Hill is that it can't stand alone. That gives us the future. One of the things we like to say about Cactus Hill is 1 is an accident, 2 is a coincidence, and 3 is a pattern. And so it's really sort of incumbent on us to find the 2nd and the 3rd site, because these people didn't just live here on Cactus Hill, but they also probably moved around. If you looked at the stone and the raw material and the type of tools and things that they were making, they were well established here at Cactus Hill, which meant in this area they were established. They knew where the stone was, and they had to live. I mean, they had to be adapted to the environment, so they knew where the animals were. You know, this is not an isolated site, not at all.
The discoveries at Cactus Hill have challenged the long-held accepted view that American Indian people first entered the North American continent about 12,000 years ago. The artifacts discovered at the site are approximately 5,000 years older than the Clovis first theory would allow. Cactus Hill opens new questions about where these first Indian people came from and pushes their history into a much deeper, if not timeless, past. There will be more Cactus Hills and undoubtedly new discoveries. New ideas to test the old as we piece together this great mystery. Who were the old ones, the ancient ones, the people of the time of the Great Cold?